I am flying to Los Angeles to speak at Podcast Movement next week. And if I want to go anywhere once I land and I get to my hotel, I have to figure out what is the address of the hotel, because to get from here to there, I have to know where here is. Well, right now, a group of awesome podcast developers are trying to take podcasting from here to there with more features, more engagement, and a better experience, both for the podcaster and the listener. And that initiative is called Podcasting 2.0. And so what I wanted to know is, what are your thoughts on Podcasting 2.0, so I can figure out where here is, so I can go back to the team and go, all right, this is what people are thinking. So if we want to get them to there, where everyone is embracing it, we got to figure out first, where is here? Also, Google Podcasts is going away in just a few weeks. And so I've spent some time with apps. None of them do what I want an app to do, but I'm going to give you 3 that come very, very close. Hit it, ladies.
The School of Podcasting with Dave Jackson.
Podcasting since 2005. I am your award-winning Hall of Fame podcast coach, Dave Jackson. Thanking you so much for tuning in. If you are new to the show, this is where we help you plan, launch, grow, and monetize, if you want to, your podcast. My website is schoolofpodcasting.com. If you throw on a /listener to that, or just use the coupon code listener, you will save on either your monthly or yearly subscription. And one of the things I do is, the last episode of the month, we have a question that I throw out to you, and then you answer it, then you promote your show a little bit. And so one of the things that started about 3 years ago is an initiative called Podcasting 2.0. And the technology that runs podcasting is called RSS. We're not going to get that nerdy about this, just for the record. But there are people that would come along and like, man, this would be so much better. We should ditch RSS and use this. And then somebody, no, we should use this. And then we should, right. And then one of the guys that invented podcasting, Adam Curry, said, what if we just make RSS feed better? And people went, oh. And so that's really at the heart what Podcasting 2.0 is. And it's been adopted by a fair number of people. I'll get into that a little later. But for me, I've always kind of thought that maybe it's lacking kind of a marketing initiative. And Daniel J. Lewis from the Audacity to Podcast and James Cridlin from podnews.net have created a site to help that. But one of the things, when you are trying to drive someplace, the first thing you have to figure out is, well, where am I? Right? The GPS has to figure out where you are so it can figure out where to go. And so my thought was, well, we've been talking about Podcasting 2.0. How confused are people? Do they understand what it is? What's the pros? What's the cons? What's going on when somebody says Podcasting 2.0? And that's the question of the month. And I'll tell you, at the end of this, there are some things that are very cool about Podcasting 2.0. I'm going to compare what's called value for value. This is one of the benefits of being Podcasting 2.0 enabled, is you can let your audience give you money directly. So if somebody says, hey man, you said booger and that's offensive and I'm offended and I'm going to go after your sponsors, and you just basically birds a waving at them, just go, yeah, I don't have any sponsors. And you'll be amazed at what people sometimes give you. So that's coming up. That's a lot of the big things that people talk about. That's also, that's the good side. Like, oh, I like money. The bad news is it's still pretty nerdy. But let's get back to the question. What do you think when you hear the phrase Podcasting 2.0?
Hi, this is Ethan Reese with the Daily Sports History Show. And for me, Podcast 2.0 is super technical and I know almost nothing about it. Really, all I know is what you talk about on your different shows, Dave. And that's how I've learned about it and how I know about it. And I see it every now and then mentioned in news articles and things, but I don't really dive too far into it because, first off, I don't want to find another podcast app. It's very difficult for me. I had to do it. I used Stitcher before and had to find a new one when they closed down. And it was hard for me to find a new app. And I think it would be hard for others to find new apps. So I think the Podcast 2.0 needs to be integrated into these current apps, which may be difficult. I know nothing about it, so I have no idea. But changing to an app that already uses it, I think is going to be very difficult for current users. Maybe someone getting new into podcasting would be more apt to learn it and get it directly from a Podcast 2.0. But for me, it's not anything I think I would do at the moment. And if you enjoy sports history, come check us out every day at Daily Sports History, where we take a topic, dive deep into it for just 10 minutes, and you can learn all you need to know to win your next trivia contest at dailysportshistory.com.
Ethan, thank you so much. There are no wrong answers, by the way. This is it's just an opinion poll, and that was a great opinion. Thank you, Ethan. And I'll say this now. Everybody that contributed, they get a link in the show notes back to your website. So if you're listening to this and you're going to hear the question of the month come up a little later, yeah, it's something called free publicity.
Hey, Dave, it's Ralph from the Ask Ralph podcast. You can find that at askralphpodcast.com, where I tackle all of your financial questions from a Christian perspective. So the question of the month is Podcasting 2.0. I thought about it for a moment. Is this something I have to download or update? So I guess the immediate answer to your question is, what is Podcasting 2.0? Well, since that time, I did a little digging, and the features of the Podcasting 2.0 really look pretty cool to me. And there's going to be some nifty features coming our way. So I'm looking forward to the 2.0 platform and unlocking those new and exciting avenues for my podcast. And I hope others will find value in them too.
Thank you, Ralph. Ralph is a member of the School of Podcasting, and that man is inquisitive, and it's a good thing. That's, as a teacher, that's what you want. And I think we only got 4 answers to this. This is probably the one that I was really sweating. I'm like, is this going to be the month when I'm like, nobody answered the question? But I think there are a lot of people like, I don't even understand the question. And I love people that send it in. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. So that is an acceptable answer. And I'll get into kind of what it is a little later in very plain English here. But we got 2 more answers.
Podcasting 2.0. What do I know about it? And if I do know about it, what do I think? That is the question that's being asked of me. Hi, my name is Zoe Richardson from Backlook Cinema, the podcast. You can find us on backlookcinema.com. And that is a great question. The honest answer is, I don't know much about it. I know that is a thing that is happening that people inside podcasting talk about a lot. And my understanding it is that it's some type of upgrade to podcasting that I guess makes the podcast or your podcast more accessible to your listeners, but everything else in it and about it is a little bit fuzzy. I remember listening to The Feed, the official Lipson podcast, and Elsie Escobar said that we're just getting people to understand podcast itself, just the concept of listening to an audio program on your phone. So anything beyond that is so advanced that it really isn't worth the conversation, at least not right now. For the most part, people who are my age and older, like I'm in my 50s, so even somebody in their 40s, they hardly know what a podcast is. And the adoption rate among the younger crowd is much higher than the adoption rate among the older crowd. And the people that I normally talk to, just getting them to understand how they can listen to and enjoy podcasts is much more challenging than talking to them about something like a movie or TV or radio. Those are easier concepts for someone to wrap their heads around. So those are my thoughts. Thanks, Dave, for asking the question.
Oh, thank you so much. Here's the thing. Back in the day, like many, like decades ago, I used to teach sales. And one of the things you have to know is when somebody has an objective, you have to have an answer. And these are great where somebody's like, yeah, that's not going to work for me. You have to go, oh, and then you have to explain the benefit. And in some cases, I don't know that we have an answer for some of these objections.
Hello, Dave. This is Brandon. I am pleased to announce that I have just launched my first podcast. It's not the personal productivity podcast that I've been working on. That is coming. But in the meantime, I decided that I wanted to document my progress and share some lessons that I've learned on my journey as a volunteer reader for LibriVox. I started recording for LibriVox about a year ago as a way to practice mic technique and to up my game in editing. Now, there's a lot to learn about the LibriVox community beyond just simple narration. I suppose you could call this a soft launch since I don't have a domain name and I haven't registered the podcast on any of the indices yet. But you can find it at brandonreads.github.io, and a link to the RSS feed is provided. More about that in a moment. Now, about Podcasting 2.0. I work in the field of software development, and I've been keeping an eye on this spec since the day I first heard about it. Of the 29 new tags, 3 of them in particular interest me, especially in the context of using podcasting as an instructional medium. The first is chapters. When I watch a YouTube video to learn something, and for me that's almost always something technical, I really appreciate it when a table of contents has been added to the video's description. It allows me to jump ahead to just the content I need to view. And that's what I want for podcasts too. Granted, this is not something I would use for casual listening, but for instructional podcasts, I think it is a necessity. I also really like the concept of chapter art. This can turn a podcast episode into a slideshow presentation. Again, not super useful when I'm mowing the lawn, but really handy for educational purposes. And it's nice to see that this tag is popular. It's currently supported by 19 apps. The next tag is seasons, and the ability to name seasons in particular. This seems like a great way to group content by topic. I'm talking about nonfiction, of course. Fiction podcasts have an obvious use case for seasons. But imagine a podcast that covers various topics in, say, mathematics. Episodes could be grouped by the specific type of math. Geometry and calculus would have their own episode lists. One observation, though. The documentation for this tag states that the decision to display the season number can be left up to the app, but I'd like to see an additional attribute that allows the podcaster to override this decision and to hide the season number. Only 6 apps support this tag right now. Finally, I find the social interact tag intriguing. If I understand it correctly, this puts a link to the conversation about the episode right there in the player. Again, I'm thinking about how useful this could be for students. I'm also happy to see the ActivityPub protocol being highlighted so prominently in the documentation. I have spent some time on the Mastodon platform, and I see a lot of promise in the future of the Fediverse. So, in case you were wondering about that GitHub address where my new podcast is hosted, this project is as much a development project for me as it is an audio endeavor. I'm actually coding the RSS feed by hand, and in the next few weeks I plan to incorporate some of the Podcasting 2.0 tags, beginning with chapters. I currently have 5 podcast players installed on my phone and 1 on my home computer, and I will be using all of them to test the feed. So, do I think it is difficult to get listeners to switch apps? Not at all. At least, not as long as the benefits are clearly communicated. As always, thank you, Dave, for all you do to educate and encourage our podcasting community.
That was amazing. This is why I have to say you have to know who your audience is. Obviously, a much technical background than maybe some of the other listeners, and you get a completely different answer. Thank you so much for the homework you did on that. That's helping me explain some of the cool things that are coming down the pike. We're going to send it over to York to bring it home.
Hi, Dave. This is York from Welcome to Earth Stories, a sci-fi original show. When I think of Podcasting 2.0, I have 2 different minds on this. My first thought is that it's geeky, and I'm into geeky things. In fact, I host a sci-fi podcast that's listened to by geeks from Japan, Jamaica, from all over the world. And I think they'll be interested in this. But my other mindset of this is the marketing aspect of the 2.0. It's overwhelming. I mean, it's kind of mixed in, not deliberately, but it's just the perception with Bitcoin. I know that it's 2 separate things, but for a lot of people, when they hear about it, that's what they think. And Bitcoin has some kind of a bad reputation in certain circles. And so they don't want to get involved in that. And that's unfortunate because it gives the podcasting 2.0 a bad name as well. I think what would be good is some clarity, some commercials and some marketing tools just to make sure that the podcasting 2.0 is distinct. And I know that there's so many features. This kind of reminds me of 2007 when Apple came out with their beloved iPhone. There was other smartphones competing at the time, but they were all about the tech, and all their commercials was about all the things that the software in the device could do. But Apple, they did a different take entirely. They didn't talk all about the technology. They talked about the experience. They made you feel that you want to be a part of their tribe. iPhone owners, they were a part of that community. And all of their commercials made you feel that, wow, if I have this product, then I have it all. And I think the same thing could be done with the podcasting 2.0. I know that the diehard geeks, it's all about the podcast namespace. But for the rest of the regular folks out there, they really want to know what's in it for them. They want to get that kind of vision, that vibe, that fire in their belly to say, yes, I want to listen to this podcast on a podcast 2.0 app. I don't think we're there yet. I hope that we will be soon, but I just don't think so. And also, I did say there's two things, but the third thing, I listen to my podcast on Pocket Cast. It's not one of the podcast 2.0 apps. I could switch, and I thought about switching, but I really enjoy my Pocket Cast. I know it doesn't have all the bells and whistles of the other ones, the podcast 2.0 that is, but it feels like home. There's going to be a long climb up the wall of people's comfortability. I'm not sure how they're going to do that. If you want to check out my show, you could go to welcometoearthstories.com. We're on season 6, and season 7 is coming out later this year. This is a sci-fi podcast. There's also some government conspiracy theories thrown in for good measure. Welcome to earthstories.com. Thanks, Dave. You take care.
Way to bring it home, York. I deeply appreciate that. So in just a second, we're going to get into what is podcasting 2.0 in English. And I'm going to explain how, if you compare that to, hey, I want to start a podcast and get ads, yeah, you'll be amazed. If you're new to the show, I love analogies. So let's start off with one. Back in the 50s, if you bought a car, it had 4 tires, brake, gas, steering wheel, and maybe a radio and a glove box. That was about it. Probably some bucket seats in there. And then somebody came up with a thing called power steering, which made it much easier to turn the wheel. We went from, I remember when I was growing up, we had a car, instead of having one big window for the, in the front seat, you had these little triangle things and you could push them out and a bunch of air would come rushing in. Then eventually came air conditioning. You get the idea. And so you start one place and then you add more features. That's one way of looking at podcasting 2.0. So some of those features, and this is just some of them. One is called Podroll. And if you remember MySpace back in the day, you could pick X amount of friends. In fact, I think you do this now on Podchaser. But what's cool about it is you could say, hey, if you like this show, you should check out the Audacity to Podcast, and you should check out In and Around Podcasting with Mark Asquith and Danny, and you should check out this, right? It's a way for you to suggest other shows, or you could point people if you have more than one show with that. Now, the beauty of that is that's now data, and all the nerds can get together and make a chart based on that, based on the podcasters' recommendations. Pretty neato. Then there are transcripts. Those are already here. In fact, everybody got all giddy, I tell you, because Apple used a podcasting 2.0 spec or a feature. Then you hear a lot about this one, value. there are two types. One is where you just put a link to maybe your PayPal or buy me a coffee. That's kind of cool. And then the other one is the Bitcoin thing. We'll talk about the Bitcoin thing, but here's the beauty of it is the audience decides how much Bitcoin to send you per minute. And they do it in the same way that here in the US we have the dollar, and then the smallest denomination is a penny. And there are 100 pennies in a dollar. Well, you have Bitcoin, and then I think it's 1/1,000,000th of a Bitcoin is called a Satoshi. And so you can pick how many Satoshis per minute you want to send. And it'll actually, I use the app Castamatic. And I have told you, if you listen to the old episodes, I loved, and I still love, Overcast. But the maker of Overcast said, nope, not going to implement it. Just, I like my app the way it is. It's his app. He can choose what he wants to do with it. And luckily, on the iOS side, there came Castamatic, which looks and smells and tastes just like Castamatic, but it has that streaming value thing. And we'll get to that in just a second. But I can see how much I'm sending people. Now, you can also do this thing called a boost, sometimes called a boostagram. And this is the Bravo. Basically, if you go to the theater and at the end, the cast comes out after doing their play and they take a bow and people go, a bravo, and they stand up, right? It's a way of going, look, I know I'm already clapping, but I'm going to stand and just to show you my more appreciation. And this is a way for people to go, hey, I really like that. Have, 5,000 Satoshis or whatever, things like that. And it sounds great, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Like, what is 5,000 Satoshis? But you all said the same thing. When it came to Bitcoin, we're all like, eeh. Yeah, it's a little new. Now, you can buy and sell Bitcoin with PayPal and the Cash App, which is really popular. And it is coming on board. But right now, it's not exactly what I call, and if your name is Cheryl and you're an aunt, I don't mean any disrespect by this, but my brother had an aunt-in-law named Aunt Cheryl, and she was a lovely woman, but she was really technically challenged. And I'm kind of like, yeah, this isn't ready for Aunt Cheryl yet. But if you're doing a show about Bitcoin or banking or money, if your audience is sniffing and playing with Bitcoin, it takes like maybe 5 minutes to set your show up. So it's something to think about. But I do a show with Daniel J. Lewis from the Audacity to Podcast. And one of the things I want to talk about, just about like York said, it's got kind of a bad reputation, Bitcoin, because a lot of people think that it chews up too much energy. We're not going to get into it. Just know you've got a computer that is running so hard to generate Bitcoin that it needs extra fans, and people are like, it's not energy efficient. And that's one side of the story. And where there is the left side, there's always the right side. And Daniel's looking into it because he's like, it may not be as inefficient as people think. So we're diving into that. I just know that when I go, okay, you have to, let's say, go to getalby.com, which is like this little wallet, and you have to use your credit card. You can't use your debit card to buy some Bitcoin. Already you're like, wait, I can't use my debit card. Nope, got to use a credit card, because if you try a debit card, your bank is going to block it. Again, not the greatest reputation, a little bit of a red flag for some people. And so when you buy your credit card, it goes into your wallet, and then you just go into the app and you say, oh, here's my Get Alby account, blah, blah, blah. And everything's safe and secure, and you can now stream Satoshis. But there's a few little hurdles there, right? Couple little red flags. Now, the good news is what I love about this is you do have an army of nerds that are looking into it. Like, how do I make it easier? And one of them is Sam Sethi, who does a website, True Fans. It's a podcast app. And if we want to get nerdy, technically it's not really an app like you get from the App Store. It is a web app, meaning you can basically go to the website and basically say, hey, put this on my front screen of my phone, whichever one you have. And Sam, because it's not an actual app in either the Google Play Store or the Apple Store, the problem with both those companies take a chunk of the change. Like Apple takes 30%, and they can kind of stop you from doing e-commerce. Well, because Sam's isn't really an app and it's not in the App Store, he has discovered that you can actually take your wallet, just a good old-fashioned credit card, and put money into it. So he's testing that. And I was like, that's good. Let's make it easy. And then, of course, the other one is for the podcaster. Yeah, I had somebody give me some money. Now, how do I get it into my actual, like, how do I buy groceries with this? Like, they don't take Bitcoin at the Piggly Wiggly. That is a fun store to say, isn't it? Come on, go ahead. Say Piggly Wiggly. It just makes you smile. I wish we had Piggly Wigglies in Ohio. I know that's a South thing, and have a pig for a mascot. Okay, end of tangent. But so that is a ways to go. Now, the other thing people have said, which is absolutely true, I myself swore you would pull Overcast from my cold dead hands. I loved that app. It did everything I wanted. And so it wasn't until its clone came out with this bonus thing that I even thought about it. But even with that, and it is easy because you can export all your podcasts, like all the settings, and then import into the other app. So you don't lose, your shows. You don't have to go back and, okay, now I got to subscribe to this show. Now I got to subscribe to that show. That's easier. We'll talk about that because the whole Google thing is coming down the pike. So that's easier. But the money transaction, which, well, who would have thunk it? That's the part that seems to grab people's attention. But the thing I love about it is the fact that it is directly from your audience. So let me give you one example, because if it's like, well, why should I even do this? And so nobody sneezes when you're like, oh, well, you can do programmatic ads. They're going to pay somewhere between 0.003 cents and 0.004 cents a download. Your mileage may vary, but somewhere that's in the ballpark. Now, one of the fun things about Podcasting 2.0 is there are certain numbers. I think it's 1701 is what people call a Star Trek boost. It has something to do with the Enterprise. But let's just take this one, 5150. That is an album from Van Halen, was the name of their album, which also coincidentally is a police call for someone who is not in their right mental state. And so people will send a podcaster a 5150. They'll send them 5,150 satoshis along with a message. And so how much is that if somebody sends you 5,150 satoshis? Well, right now, as it is March 22nd, 2024, that is $3.28. So if you have three people, let's just stick with one. So $3.28 is what I earn for that. So what you can do, that's right, it's time for fun math with Dave. So $3.28. And now let's divide that by, let's say we got a killer deal and we're making 0.004 cents per download from our programmatic ads. Well, that means you would have to get 820 downloads to make up the money from a single boost from one person who sent you 5150. And so the question is, what's easier? To get somebody to send you a Van Halen boost or to get 820 additional downloads? And that's when I was like, And that's where you'll hear people say the phrase value for value. And so if somebody wants to go, attaboy, Dave, they can send me however many satoshis that they want. Now, do I get a lot of boosts? No. But I did get one I'll talk about here in a second. But nonetheless, the question is, comparing it to programmatic ads, when Daniel and I first started doing the future of podcasting, we have, because that audience is really nerdy, we're getting a fair amount of incoming, just streaming satoshis, where people are streaming anywhere from 3 satoshis a minute up to over 100. And that adds up. But that, again, is with a really nerdy audience. But you never know. You're letting your audience pick. So one of the cool things about this is you can go in to different websites and see how many, like I've received, well, we'll get to that. I've received a fair amount of sats and how many I've paid. But recently, Sam Sethi from truefans.fm sent us satoshis. Now that sounds like almost like $1 bazillion, right? Well, it's not a bad chunk of change. That's $63.71 on March 22nd in 2024. If you divide that by 0.004, that is 15,927 downloads if you're getting paid 0.004 cents, which is $4 CPM in case you're wondering, $4 per 1,000. What's easier to get? One crazy app developer that I love dearly. Thank you, Sam. Go to truefans.fm. It's a great app and it's got a great web interface. So is it easier to get, a crazy generous donor or 15,927 downloads? And that's the beauty of it. Like some people, like $63 to some people may be like, I got that in my couch cushions. And other people are like, I could give you $3. It's up to the audience. But the hurdles right now are still the whole getting money in and getting money out. So we're happy to see things like the Cash App and PayPal. But even like PayPal, okay, I bought some Bitcoin. It's in PayPal. Okay, now you got to send it to Alby. That's not super easy. But it's features made to enhance the listening and engagement with your audience. One of the things they're also working on, you know how if you go to YouTube, you can leave a comment and you'll see it on YouTube and then you see it on the YouTube app. Those are comments. We're trying to get cross app comments. So I could maybe leave a comment in Good Pods, and it would show up in Cast-O-Matic, and then somebody else could leave a comment in Podcast Guru, and it would show up in Podverse. Cross-app comments, and there are a lot of nerds working on that. And my buddy Craig Van Slyke from AI Goes to College made a great point once. He goes, it kind of sounds like it's a bunch of nerds just doing nerdy things to see if they could do it. And I go, yeah, I can see that point of view. So that's what it is. Now, here's my point. It doesn't cost you anything to make your show available to receive Bitcoin. So why not do it? Because there are a number of people that are listening to this. And if nothing else, set it up to receive. And if you never figure out how to get it out, there's the kids' college fund. And now I want to peel back the curtain because I'm going to do something just to prove a point. You ready for this? I'm going to hit you with a bunch of stats and just watch your brain tune out. When you do math or a bunch of facts and stats in a podcast, your brain is just like, do I need milk? Here we go. First of all, there are 19,395 shows already using Podcasting 2.0. If you look at the number of shows that have put out an episode in the last 30 days, that's 357,841. I know there's 4 million podcasts, but only 357,000 have put one out in the last 30 days, which means that is 5.4%. Yay, fun with math. That's how many people are currently embracing the Podcasting 2.0 value for value feature. Now, one of the reasons this was even invented is because Apple Podcasts started pulling some shows that they disagreed with the content out of Apple Podcasts, which is kind of called censorship. Now, let's not get crazy. There's some people, everybody's favorite word. You know what I'm going to say right now, right? Because if I disagree with you, that makes you, begins with an N. That's right, Nazi. Everybody's a Nazi. And so some people got pulled out just because they said booger or something of that nature. And that's, again, one of the guys that invented podcasting said, yeah, that's not cool. He's really like 100% freedom of speech. And so he said, we should have a backup in the event this goes really wrong with Apple. So they invented this thing called the Podcast Index. And that's where there are some of these new apps that only look at the Podcast Index. Like if your show is in Apple Podcasts, but you're not in the Podcast Index, they can't see your show. So it's like the nerds are building an alternative universe to Apple. Not that we hate Apple. I love Apple, especially for everything they've ever done. But the nerds, and I say that with love, got tired of waiting for these cool things. They're like, no, we could do this. Oh, well, Apple's not implementing them. Apple's, they've been a great custodian of podcasting, but as you might imagine, they're not making any money with podcasting unless you do the whole subscription thing. But they just went, well, let's quit waiting on Apple. And that's what's basically happening. So the last stat I thought I would leave you with, and I believe this is over 3 years, I've received 894,030 satoshis. The cool kids call them sats, of course, which means in 3 years I've made $574.95. Not a bad, right? Better than a poke in the eye. And if we were to continue with our math problem, why stop now? $574.95 divided by let's go crazy. Let's say we got 0.005 cents a download. Well, what would that mean? That would be 114,990 downloads. So which one's easier? Especially, I'm here. If it was me, I would just set it up and forget about it. You do have to kind of let your audience know, hey, this show is now Podcasting 2.0 enabled. If you'd like to send a boostagram, feel free. And you can go to modern podcast apps if you'd like to try a new app. And I agree with everyone who said, that's a hurdle, because once you find an app you like, boy, you really don't want to change. And that leads us to our next topic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I kind of feel like I'm giving this too much of a stage, but I'm going to talk about Google Podcasts going away. I've mentioned this before. And the reason I say that, they only had 3% of the market, but it's hard to get any part of the market, and they're going away. And from what I've heard, Google is not going to redirect the link that you have that goes to Google Podcasts to Google YouTube Music. And I need to double check this, but according to James Cridland, you can't link directly to a show in YouTube Music. Just one of the many reasons why I'm not recommending my audience migrate, if you're on Google Podcasts, to YouTube Music. It's kind of an app that is like they bolted on podcasting to it. I want an app that was designed from day one to listen to podcasts. And I have a list of what I want in an app, and the thing that makes me kind of nuts is none of them on the Android side do it. My favorite app on the iOS side is Castamatic. If you are a Overcast user and you want some of that Podcasting 2.0 functionality, if I'm Marco, the guy from Overcast, I'm suing the guy from Castamatic because he somehow really cloned his app. But my problem is there's nothing, there are a couple that are close on the Android side. And so that's my stance on this. This is the best I got at this point if you're on Android. And so what I'm looking for is a smart playlist. I love that feature. And what this is I can say, hey, I'm following this show now. When it comes in, go to the money playlist, or go to the health playlist, or go to the podcasting playlist. And I don't have to do anything. It just, when I'm ready to listen about money, I click on the money playlist, and they're all my favorite shows. So I love those. And then I want controls over when the files are downloaded, and I do want them to download, and I want controls that allow me to download when I'm on Wi-Fi. I do a lot of stuff outdoors in the summer, and I don't have to rely on AT&T to stream stuff for me. So 3, speaking of streaming, I want speed control on a show-by-show basis. Some shows, the hosts just talk slower. And those people, I listen at 1.8 or something like that. So I want that on, not on hey, here, speed up everybody. No. Because other people talk like me, and they're really, really fast, and you need to slow me down because you can't understand what I'm saying. So speed control on a show-by-show basis. Volume leveling. It's sad that we need to do this, but one show will blow my head off, and the next one I can't hear at all, so I need something to adjust the volume. And I really love it if they have a web-based version so that I can listen on my computer without having to plug my phone into it. And if I can pick up right where I left off, that's amazing. Now, that's a feature I'm willing to give up, but you get a lot of kudos if you have one. The ability to upload files like a rough draft of a podcast so I can listen to it through the app. I love that feature. Overcast has it. Cast-O-Matic has it. Pocket Cast has it. A bunch of them, and that I'll talk about. And then I'm hoping they're kind of nerdy because I want that value for value. It's kind of weird. I've been trying different apps, and when I can't stream satoshis when you're used to, I kind of feel guilty because I'm getting this great content and they're getting nothing but a smile. And like I say, none of these apps do all 7 of those. None of them. And so here's my answer so far to what I have. And the first one is Podorama. And this right now, if it had, the value for value, it'd be like my number one app because Podurama has everything. They have a web-based version. I can upload files. They even have a cool thing where you can rate episodes. So as a podcaster, you can go in and see which episodes are resonating. That's kind of cool. And I mean, it works on iOS. It works on Android. It's a web-based version. And I don't know how they do it. It's some sort of freaky mojo that I can be listening on my computer through their website, hit pause, pick up my phone, and it picks up, and I mean right where I left off. It's a very impressive, very pretty app. And the thing I love about it, I like smart lists, right? Smart playlists. Most other apps have this queue thing where they just dump off a wheelbarrow full of episodes, and then you make a list. Like, here, put this one in the list to listen to. That's called a queue. Podurama does both. And they play video if you have video podcasts. So it's a great app. Everybody should go over to podurama.com, click on the support link, and go, hey, Dave wants you to add value for value. The next one that comes the closest is Podcast Guru. Podcast Guru works again on iOS and Android. And remember, I'm looking for an Android app for my Google Podcast people. It does have a web interface. And when I first started using it, the web interface was not updating. Now, to their credit, I emailed them. They got back very quickly, went over and, I don't know, grabbed Fonzie and had him hit the jukebox, and it started syncing again. But very, very cool. They do have the files thing, too, where you can upload files. So I like that. They do the value for value thing. Great. Amazing. They don't do smart lists. I'm like, oh, come on. So close, but they're working on smart playlists. So whichever one happens first, Podcast Guru brings in smart playlists or Podurama adds value for value. That's going to be my default app for recommending things to people. Again, I'm happy with my app. I'm on iOS and I'm using Cast-O-Matic. The other one is truefans.fm. This app, if you want to see all the features that are available for the podcasting 2.0 space. Now realize if your podcaster is not doing anything with that, these aren't going to really come into play. But it's a little different because you're not going to really find this in the Android app or the iOS iPhone app store because it's not really an app. It's a website, and it's one of those, if you go to it on your phone, you can click on it and say, add this to my homepage. And then at that point, it's just a little button. So it's really like a little baby website that looks and smells and tastes just like an app. And it's got some really cool things. It is, along with Podcast Guru, it's new. So some of these still have, I still don't understand playlists on this. I don't think they're smart at this point. I do like the value for value and it has everything. The only thing I'm worried about with True Fans is I don't think I can download files. Like, I'm getting ready to go to Podcast Movement. And this is one of the reasons why I download files to my phone so I can listen when I don't have Wi-Fi. And I'm not sure how that would work, but True Fans looks great on your phone. It works on the website. Their website's, I still find things where I'm like, wait, in terms of like, if I stop on my phone and go to the website, that's a little wonky at this point. But Sam Sethi is a hardworking guy, and he has been working on True Fans for a long time. There are other ones. I like Pocket Casts. Pocket Cast kind of did we were just kidding. They had said they were going to embrace value for value and podcasting 2.0, and we all got excited, and I downloaded the app. It has, again, all the features I want, except the value for value. And they said they were going to add it, and that was probably 10 months ago, if not longer, and they haven't. Another app is Pocket Casts, and the only reason I would say try that one, it's been around forever, and I know they embrace some podcasting 2.0 stuff. So right now, if I'm looking for an easy to use, now granted, again, none of these do them all. So I'm ever so disappointed in all of them a little bit. But the prettiest one that works the coolest right now for me is Podurama. And so it's also very easy if you sign up for free. You can go in, find your show, and then just grab the link at the top for your show and put that on your website. I'm not sending people to YouTube Music. I just, in the same way that Spotify, especially now Spotify with audiobooks, it's cluttered. And I want, maybe it's probably a reflection of me. I'm kind of a power user when it comes to listening to podcasts. So I want an app just dedicated to podcasts that really lets me get into the meat and bones. So that's that. On April 2nd, Google Podcasts, though, you won't be able to use that anymore. And then eventually they're going to stop it working at all. I think they said in June or August, something like that. So right now, that's my app. And again, I kind of feel like 3% of you care about this, but also somebody mentioned moving from Stitcher. I still see people with Stitcher buttons on their website. So go to your website, remove the Google button. I'd replace it with a Podurama or a True Fans or a Podcast Guru. Take your pick, or just add all three and remove Google. And if it's still there, remove Stitcher. As I listened to this, I realized I forgot to mention one of my favorite features is chapters, especially for a show like this where I have multiple topics. And I'm using Chapters, the 2.0 version. The old version was in your MP3. So if you made a boo-boo, you had to upload the file again. Podcasting 2.0 makes it easier. You just go into your media host and update the boo-boo there. You can actually have images that show up. Somebody talked about that. And you can have links. So marketers should love that. Now, if your host doesn't support any of these, you need to email their support and go, hey, when are you guys going to start accepting, creating, developing 2.0 features? Because if you don't, they won't. And I was in the room when this first went down. And I mean, there were people there from Libsyn and Blueberry and Transistor and, Buzzsprout, all sorts of people. And it was kind of cool because they all we held hands, we sang Kumbaya, and we said, this isn't going to work unless we all adapt these kind of at the same time, which will then force the apps to add these features. And so far, that hasn't happened. And it doesn't mean there's any animosity. Just every person, every company has their own version of this thing called tech debt, which just means it's hard to steer a giant boat quickly. And so right now, I would say Blueberry is the one that's adopted the most, and then Captivate, Buzzsprout, and Libsyn has like one or two. And yes, I know I work for Libsyn, but that's a fact. It's not an opinion, it's a fact. And so if your host doesn't support these things and you want them, you're like, hey, I like that Podroll idea, or hey, they don't know what you want unless you tell them. And so this goes for all the Podbeans, what other ones that I don't really play with much. There are some new ones that have adopted everything, but podcast media hosting, they will not build stuff unless you say, I want this. So, and I'm here to tell you, 1 email makes a difference. 2 email, very better. So if you're listening to this and go, I'm going to do that later, I'm saying, no, do it now. And it's almost always support at whatever your media host is. At Libsyn, at Captivate, at Blueberry, at, Podbean, at Buzzsprout, at Donner, on Blitzen, on Cupid, etc., etc., etc. And the other thing that we've kind of uncovered here is Podcasting 2.0 needs a little more marketing to help the end user and the listener get this. And that website is podcasting2.org, podcasting2.org. So if you want to be involved with this, I'll put a link to a video. It takes next to no time to get set up, even if you do nothing else, because there are people that are using apps that are equipped to that. And I realize it's hard to get people to change an app, but there are people that are already like me using Cast-O-Matic, that are using Podcast Guru, that are using these other tools, and they're more than happy to stream some Bitcoin at you. And so why not make it easy for them to do that? I'll have a link to the video. It takes about maybe 3 minutes, and give it a shot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
If you are going to be in Los Angeles next week at Podcast Movement Evolutions, please stop by the Libsyn booth. I'll be there a lot of the time, except on Thursday when I'm speaking. And I would love to say hi, take a picture, high five, bump knuckles, whatever you want to do. I'd be happy to do that and have a chat. And in May, I'm going to the Content Entrepreneurs Expo, better known as CEX. You can find that at cex.events. And the man behind that is the godfather of content marketing, Joe Pulizzi. And I interviewed him last week. Such a nice guy, a great interview. And I will be doing two things in next week's episode with Joe. Number one, I'm going to play the interview. And then I did a couple of things that were so Dave Jackson. And that is, I start to answer see, I'm doing it right now. I start to ask the question before my brain has figured out what I'm asking. And I end up with these mile-long questions that I then cut down to the actual question, and you never hear it. Well, next week, I'm going to show you just how awful I am at asking questions. And I was ever so slightly, it wasn't nervous, but I was hyper-focused on Joe's answers so I could really figure out what's the next question to ask. So that's what's coming up next week in the School of Podcasting. Also have Katie Brinkley. If you remember a couple of questions of a month ago, when everybody's like, I am done with social, I'm like, all right, I got to find a social media strategist to figure out what we're doing wrong with social and how we can get it to work with our podcast. And Katie Brinkley is somebody I've bumped into enough to where I was finally like, you know what? You should come on my show. Now, you can get all these episodes the minute they are ready by going to schoolofpodcasting.com/follow. Also, while you're out at schoolofpodcasting.com, click on the sign up button and use the coupon code LISTENER when you sign up to get either a monthly or yearly subscription to the School of Podcasting. And you're like, I'm not sure about this. You have 29 and a half days, 29.5 days to figure out if you like it or not, and then cancel, and I will give you your money back. You have a 30-day money-back guarantee. Check it out, schoolofpodcasting.com/listener. Thank you so much for tuning in. I realize you're busy, and the fact that you just took 49, maybe 50 minutes with the ads in here to listen to me, I really do appreciate your time, and I do my best to never, ever waste it. So take care. I will see you next week with another fun-filled episode of the School of Podcasting. Take care. God bless. Class is dismissed.